The Committee on Higher Education will come to order. The clerk will please take attendance.
Chair Glanville,
Present.
Representatives Reingens,
Present.
Colzar. Here. Scott.
Present.
Burns.
Here.
Kofia.
Yes, here.
Hill. Here. McDonald.
Present.
Pies.
Present.
Vanderwall.
Present.
Paquette. Here. Zorn. Here. Bruck.
Present.
Desana.
Present.
Madam Chair, you have 14 members present as well.
All right. We are flipping the script just a little bit this morning, and we're going to vote out House Bill 4573, the sunset extension that we heard testimony on last week. Before we do that, Representative Reingens moves to approve the minutes of the June 14th meeting, so without objection, so ordered. And now we're going to get to our vote. Yes. Rep. Colzar moves to explain the H1 sub for this vote. You should have the sub there before you. What am I doing? Let's try that again. Representative Colzar moves to adopt the H1 sub for 4573, and I will explain what we have here. We had a little bit of discussion around the minimum wage and the Alice household wage that was in the bill, and so we have just changed that language to make it a little bit clearer. So we're removing at least the lesser of the following, and instead it will read, on line 24, it will read that the wage paid for the job at the time of the contract is either 175% of the state minimum wage or the county Alice household survival budget for a household of one adult and one child. And I hope that clarifies some of the questions that we had last week. And I believe we have some cards to read in. All right. And not wishing to speak, supporting the bill is David Wamtham's one.
We need to vote first.
All right, so we'll vote first. Sorry. All right. Will the clerk call the roll on adopting the H1 substitute?
On the motion to adopt the H1 substitute, Chair Glanville,
Yes.
Representative Reingens,
Yes.
Colzar,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
Kofia,
Yes.
Hill,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Pies,
Yes.
Vanderwall,
Yes.
Paquette,
No.
Zorn,
Yes.
Bruck,
Yes.
Desana.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 13 yeas, 1 nay, 0 pass. The motion prevails.
Thank you. And now, Representative Hill moves to report the bill, HB 4573, with recommendation as substitute H1. Will the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to report the bill with recommendation as substitute, Chair Glanville,
Yes.
Representative Reingens,
Yes.
Colzar,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
Kofia,
Yes.
Hill,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Pies,
Yes.
Vanderwall,
Yes.
Paquette,
No.
Zorn,
Yes.
Bruck,
Yay.
Desana.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 13 yeas, 1 nay, 0 pass. The motion prevails.
Thank you, and thank you all for your support. I know we heard a lot of great testimony. It's a great program for the state, so excited to have this moving forward. And with that, the committee will go at ease. The committee will come to order. Next up this morning, I would like to welcome Representative Whitwer and Wilson, who are here to inform us on the subject of name, image, and likeness. And we will have some bills will be forthcoming on this subject later in the year. So just here to give us a little overview of what that's all about. Representative Whitwer when you're ready.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Higher Education Committee. This is Alex Bresky from Michigan State University. She'll be here to answer any of your technical questions. I'm thankful for the opportunity to be with you this morning to talk about name, image, and likeness bills. The legislation that we are seeking would make a significant shift in the landscape of college athletics and student-athlete compensation, allowing student athletes to profit from their own NIL rights, providing them with new opportunities and potential revenue streams. The primary objective of the NIL legislation that we are seeking is to empower student athletes by recognizing their rights to control and monetize their own name, image, and likeness. This move acknowledges the value and marketability of student athletes' personal brand and allows them to capitalize on their popularity, endorsements, and other business ventures. The NIL legislation that we are seeking promotes fairness and equity among student athletes. Previously, colleges and universities profited significantly from the athletic abilities and performances of their student athletes, while the athletes themselves were unable to benefit financially. With the new legislation in place, student athletes can now receive compensation that reflects their market value, leveling the playing field and providing a more equitable system. The introduction of NIL legislation opens up new economic opportunities for student athletes. They can now enter into endorsement deals, monetize their social media presence, participate in commercial activities, and explore various entrepreneurial ventures. These opportunities not only provide financial support during their college years, but they also prepare them for futures beyond athletics by gaining valuable business and marketing experience. The NIL legislation that we are seeking aligns with the educational mission of post-secondary institutions by allowing student athletes to engage in entrepreneurial activities and pursue business opportunities related to their NIL. Colleges and universities promote an environment that encourages creativity, innovation, and real-world learning experiences. This exposure can complement their academic education and provide them with a holistic skill set. With the NIL legislation that we are proposing in place, Michigan's post-secondary schools gain a competitive advantage in recruiting top student athletes. The opportunity for student athletes to profit from their NIL rights becomes an attractive factor when considering different colleges and universities. This could potentially lead to the recruitment of more talented athletes, which in turn can enhance the overall competitiveness and reputation of Michigan's post-secondary sports programs. While this NIL legislation we propose brings many benefits, it also necessitates the establishment of a regulatory framework to ensure compliance and avoid potential abuses. It is crucial to strike a balance between allowing student athletes to benefit from their NIL while maintaining the integrity of college athletics. Clear guidance and monitoring mechanisms should be implemented to prevent conflicts of interest, unfair practices, and undue influence from external parties. I thank you for your consideration. We'd be happy to answer any questions. I'll just add personally, if you've ever worked in college athletics, you know that their entire day is immersed in this. They don't have time to do other jobs, and the colleges do benefit from having these great athletes on their campuses. And now I will turn it over to my answer person, Alex.
Alex, do you have any preliminary comments you want to make, or?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you for all of that. I think we have heard a lot lately, in the last couple of years, particularly around this topic. So pleased to have it coming through committee, and that we're going to be able to move some legislation to help out our student athletes potentially. Are there any questions? Rep. Colasar?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your testimony. I'm curious because I remember this was a public act a couple of years ago allowing name and image and likeness. What issues have cropped up since that we're trying to fix now?
Yes, thank you. So the legislation that we're looking to introduce and to fix would allow the universities and colleges in the state to have a more of a vested interest in student athlete NIL. It would allow them to, help facilitate, help look at things for our student athletes. Currently, we're bound by NCAA legislation as to what we can and can't do. While the original bill expanded some of those things, there are still more things that we can do. And first and foremost, we're always looking to help out our student athletes, and this would allow us to do that.
Representative Paquette?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, thank you for your testimony. This is something I don't know a whole lot about. So in terms of, I guess, the breakdown, there's an image being used, some funding comes in. What is that, what are the dollars, what do they break down into? And how much goes to the university, how much goes to the student? What are some numbers there, if you don't mind?
Sure. In terms of NIL compensation, that all goes directly to the student athlete. NCAA member institutions are prohibited from providing any type of NIL compensation to our student athletes. So all those dollars that come in from those NIL opportunities go directly to the student athlete.
And so these bills are trying to siphon some of those dollars, or is that, what exactly is happening there?
Any introduced legislation would allow us to expand how we help our student athletes, so maybe it would be help facilitating a deal with them to expand their opportunities, not our opportunities, but our student athletes' opportunities to earn more NIL compensation.
And so one of the points here is saying that we should allow all of the dollars to go to the player directly. And so does this legislation then take some of those dollars to the university, or do they make some money off that, or no?
Nope, NIL compensation is always directly for the student athlete. We would not benefit in any way.
Gotcha, thank you.
So just a point of clarification there, what I heard you say, I think, if you can confirm this, is that this legislation, any potential legislation, would seek to kind of protect or help the student manage those
Yeah, so any
contracts
potential
and-
legislation would allow a university to assist a student athlete in their NIL opportunities. So whether that be, passing along information, helping facilitate a deal, it would allow an institution to provide more support to a student athlete that we can't otherwise do right now under the current NCAA interim policy.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I can imagine there's a lot of high-level talk going on out there that they might need some assistance with understanding. Representative Hill.
Thank you. This topic also came up in the Labor Committee. I had a chance to speak on it briefly. I was a former college student athlete, NAA, and whatever it is, Division I. At the time, it was 4 hours a day, 6 days a week. Is that still the case? Do you know what the hours are in terms of that was spent in the gym? Is that still true?
Perfect. Yeah. So for our student athletes who are in season, so that's when they're middle of their competitive season, it's still that 4 hours a day, but they're limited to a max of 20 hours per week, and that can be broken up how a coach sees fit. When a student athlete is out of season, so for example, a field hockey student athlete in February, when they're out of season, they're limited to 8 hours per week. Still the max of 4 hours per day, but 8 hours per week.
We used to do 6 hours a day when we were out of season. We did doubles. We did 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon.
Goodness.
So I'm glad to hear that cooler heads are prevailing there. And in terms of, so thank you for that clarification. And just on how much time student athletes are spending in the gym. And I was not on scholarship, by the way, when I did this. So and there's a question I have is about high school as well as college. Frankly, the gym at my high school was bigger than the gym at my college, growing up in Indiana. So there's a question of how are high school students also being potentially having the opportunity to be compensated, and could you just reflect a little bit on that, please?
Actually, Representative Wilson's bill, he'll be speaking to that.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Rep. Burns.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your testimony today. I'm wondering, since the original bill was enacted back in 2020, roughly how many college student athletes have taken advantage of this personal compensation opportunity?
I can only speak for our Michigan State student athletes. I don't have an exact number, but I can tell you that student athletes in all of our sports have taken advantage if they've chosen to do so. It has opened up opportunities for them. Obviously, some of our student athletes, are very busy and have chosen not to, but we do have a wide breadth of student athletes across almost all of our sports who have engaged in NIL opportunities.
Wonderful, thank you.
Representative Brooke.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question regarding, so amateur sports, they're not being paid, they're going to college. I mean, obviously a very few percentage of college athletes make it to pros. So they are there for an education, essentially, and they will go into a career field. I guess if your star players or, that you're getting compensated through various means, whatever means that is, through the NIL or through your Facebook or you're selling shirts. I guess it kind of opens up the door for a lot of different avenues or revenue streams, especially if you're a great player. Does this, I guess I'm not a psychologist or anything, but I guess my question would be, it was set up the same as high school sports as, it's amateur, it's fun, you're playing, you're getting your education. Getting paid or doing what you do to make money or to get revenue, does that in any way create an inequity on the team or the players, socially, or from a psychological view? Like, I guess, is there downsides or do you see downsides from the college level? I mean, I look at the Olympics and I think the Olympics got spoiled by going to professional athletes. I mean, but I understand there's a lot of different dynamics there as well, but I'd just like to hear that response in that. Thank you.
Sure. Obviously, I can't speak to anything psychological. I can speak to what I've observed. NIL has allowed all of our student athletes to take advantage of these things, and you can think of it as they are doing exactly what a regular student on Michigan State's campus could do. So before this legislation went into effect, before the NCAA adopted an interim policy, a regular student on campus could sell a t-shirt with their name. They could run a camp. They could do all those things. And our student athletes were prohibited from doing that. Now it's opened that up. So our student athletes are on a level playing field with all of their colleagues at the institution. In terms of, locker room dynamics, things like that, I can't speak to that. I'm not in those locker rooms, but we haven't observed any of those issues currently. But if we do hear of some, I can certainly relay those back to you.
Okay, thank you. And one follow-up question. If the NCAA doesn't allow it, if we change our state rules, how does that work with the NCAA?
Yeah, so
Thank you.
currently, in a state that doesn't have a state law, we're bound by the NCAA's interim policy, or if your state law is silent to an issue. If this legislation were introduced and adopted, we would defer to our state law, and that would supersede the NCAA interim policy.
Rep. Hill.
Thank you. That reminded me of a question. And I'll just say that there's always the dynamics of who's better than another on the team, and your team can rise with those folks being better than others, or it can not. So I don't know that the money necessarily changed. I did have colleagues of mine who went on to play professionally in Europe, and it was great to have that level of quality on the team. To be honest, it means you win. So it really depends on the coach and the atmosphere at the program. I have a question though about scholarships. Is the other piece I want. So how does if a student athlete is receiving these funds, does it impact their scholarship? And could you walk through what the law would and wouldn't do regarding that?
Sure, absolutely. NIL compensation in no way affects a student athlete's athletic scholarship. We're bound by specific NCAA financial aid rules in terms of those scholarships, and we've got very limited parameters as when we can reduce or cancel that. So NIL compensation would not affect an athletic scholarship. In terms of any money received from, the university for need-based aid, things like that, that obviously gets figured in when student athletes fill out their taxes, things like that. It might reduce some of their need-based aid, but now they've made up for that by the compensation they're earning from their name, image, and likeness.
We have one final question here, Rep. Soren.
Thank you, Chair. The question I have is, when our student athletes, our amateurs, begin to get paid, we consider them to be professionals. I'm just wondering, if we start paying our amateurs at a young age, if we're setting them up to fail, because most probably won't make it into professionals. And I just wonder what the psychological problem is going to be with those that we pay in college or high school. What the psychological problems will be when they do fail after being paid.
Yeah, so I think an important clarification to point out is our student athletes with name, image, and likeness aren't being paid for their athletic performance. They're not being paid for anything that occurs on the field. It's for what occurs off the field. It's for their name, image, and likeness. So they're not professionalizing themselves. They're simply monetizing that name, image, and likeness. And as far as any kind of psychological, anything like that, again, I can't speak to that, but I can let you know that our student athletes have benefited from this. They've been allowed now to make that compensation, and a lot of our student athletes have taken full advantage of those opportunities.
And I would add that if you heard earlier, it's a 20-hour, at the least amount, 20 hours a week job for them to be a student athlete. They're incapable of holding another job. So this is a way of them being able to get some extra money, even if they're not the star athlete. So this is, what is the psychological, what's been the problem in the past with them being incapable of raising money because they're a student athlete and they can't make money off their own name, image, and likeness. So I would say this, I did a paper in college about how unfair it is that they don't have the ability to work, and their coaches and their universities make quite a bit of money off of their abilities that they bring to the table. So for me, I look at it the opposite way. How has it hurt our past student athletes when they're not given the opportunity to make money?
All right, and I would just add to that too. I think we all recognize how much our culture has changed and the role of influencers and the opportunities that exist for students, as you mentioned, whether they're athletes or not, and for our student athletes to not be able to take advantage of that is, again, an equity issue for them. So I think it's kind of just answering, where we are today, like it or not, and is giving them that opportunity again. So, all right, seeing no further questions, thank you so much for being here this morning, and hope to hear more on this soon. And now we're going to switch gears to a similar topic at the high school level, and Rep. Wilson is going to introduce how this, any pending legislation would look at the high school level.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to come and talk about potential legislation in regards to NIL deals for high school athletes. I'll just give you a backdrop for those. I was listening to previous testimony, the history here of NIL deals in general. There was a college athlete, Ed O'Bannon, early 90s. He played at UCLA. He went on to play in the NBA from the mid-90s to about the early 2000s. When he retired, he looked back at how colleges specifically were exploiting athletes and making millions of dollars off of the name, image, and likeness of their athletes. However, the athletes were not being compensated. They were almost being exploited. And so he filed a lawsuit against the NCAA, and that was 2009. 2015, it took a long time. Supreme Court finally said, you can have a name, image, and likeness deal as a student athlete. And so that's where this all came from. And then obviously, like Rep. Burns said, in 2020, we codified that here into law. Currently, on the collegiate level, you have about 30 states that have this in place. And as far as high schools, we would be the 20th state to put this into law. So what potential legislation would do in regards to high school athletes, much like what Representative Whitwer spoke about, it would allow for student athletes to profit from their own name, image, and likeness rights, providing them a wide array of opportunities they would otherwise not have access to. We would provide guidelines for high school student athletes and their ability to receive compensation for their name, image, and likeness. It would prohibit Michigan high schools from setting any mandates that would prevent a student from fully participating in their athletics programs based on their students earning compensation through any kind of NIL deal. And also, I want to speak on what Rep. Hill had mentioned. We're going to also make sure that there's no financial aid impact, whether it be when they're trying to go to the collegiate level, but also even in regards to private high schools. Sometimes that there's financial aid for an athlete or for a student. We want to make sure that this doesn't impact them as well. There's numerous other states that have already provided guidance and have allowed these earnings, like I just mentioned. By allowing these high school student athletes to to earn revenue through their NIL rights, we are giving them power and control over whether or not to capitalize on their own name, image, and likeness. In a world that's forever changing, in a large part, thanks to the internet, we're working towards giving high school student athletes the right to market themselves through online presence, endorsement deals, and more. And I just want to make mention of one more thing that we're going to make sure we address, specifically for high school athletes, that's going to be different than the collegiate level. Obviously, collegiate athletes, these are adults. High schools, these are still youth, and they are underage. So we're going to make sure that we prohibit certain categories in which students may not engage in. So we're going to have proposed language that students may not engage in NIL activities involving or displaying or endorsing the following categories or products and services: adult entertainment products and services, alcoholic products, tobacco and electronic smoking products, opioids, prescription pharmaceuticals, controlled dangerous substances, casinos and gambling, including sports betting, weapons, firearms, ammunition. These are going to be other categories that we're going to make sure that they, as youth, are not going to be able to capitalize off of in those categories. So that's kind of the general overview of what we're proposing for high school athletes. So again, thank you for allowing me to testify.
Thank you so much for being here today. Do we have any questions for Rep. Wilson? That's a little slightly different take on this. Rep. Burns?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Rep. Wilson, for your testimony today and for your work on this bill. I know you mentioned some items or topic areas, I suppose, that college student athletes would not be able to kind of lend their name and likeness to, which I appreciate you kind of expanding upon. Can I ask, would that also include like diet supplements, things of that nature? Because I know that diet supplements and other things in that kind of universe can have an adverse effect on young people's, and really people of any age, but especially young people's body image and so on. Is that under that umbrella?
We haven't discussed that because we're going to be working closely with the Michigan High School Athletic Association on drafting this language, and that one's not mentioned as a problematic category for our high school athletes.
Okay, great. I'd love to continue that conversation as you are moving forward on this.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Rep. Burns. I had the same thought when I was considering some of this. On to Rep. Bruck.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for being here. What governs this right now? What keeps a high school athlete from working?
Well, they can work. This would allow them to benefit from their, and we're really talking about kind of the top 1% of athletes here in the state. So they can obviously.
Chris Webber's that.
Yeah.
I don't remember many high school athletes outside of a few, but.
Yes. So obviously they can have a regular, traditional job. However, what they do in athletics, now they would be able to, if this proposed legislation were to pass, they could actually benefit from what they do athletically speaking.
Is it currently prohibited by like the Michigan High School Association, Athletic Association?
There's no language in place that allows it currently. And so this would actually finally put language into place to allow this.
Okay, so this is something that could occur like currently. I mean, it doesn't. essentially, I guess I kind of go into the administration. Is this a different type of administration of, is the high school then involved with a student athlete utilizing their NIL?
Also, what we're going to have in the proposed legislation is that we're going to take it out of kind of the high school's hands, because we don't want 750 different high schools having different I guess, input on how this should look. And so we're going to run everything through the Michigan High School Athletic Association. So the schools will be hands off on really being a part of any contract that is signed. You'll still have to have parental rights like any other contract that you're signing as a youth. So I hope that kind of answers the question. there.
I guess it kind of does. I guess what if I understand the NCAA, like I've always thought that, like, you know, they're not allowed to work. Where in a high school, I mean, I worked, did sports, did all sorts of things. What keeps is there student athletes? I mean, what keeps them from starting their own YouTube account and, you know, putting them doing it, you know, and get so many likes? They get money, they get paid. Will they still be able to do that, or will it anything or any funding that a high school athlete then makes because of their NIL would have to be funneled through the state, essentially?
No, it wouldn't have to be funneled through the state, but right now, being that there's no language in place to allow it to happen, and that's what we're trying to do, is put something in place that gives some governance over that and actually put stipulations on what you can and can't do.
But still, a student athlete would be able to do their own thing on the side if they wanted to? Or
They couldn't enter into any contracts currently. And so what this is allowing is them to enter into a NIL contract, name, image, and likeness contract.
Okay, so currently
They can't.
they cannot.
No.
If you're a minor, even with your parent or something, you
Correct.
can't enter into a contract.
That's
Okay,
correct.
I hate to be naive on
No,
this.
that's
but,
all right.
But I'm just trying to explain why, or the necessity. If they can't do that currently, this allows them to
Correct.
do that, most likely with their parental consent or something
Yes.
nature, because they're a minor,
Right.
I'm assuming, enter into a contract. Okay, thank you.
All right, we're going to go at ease for just a minute here and then pick up with some more questions. All right, we will come back to order. And thank you all for your willingness to kind of roll with things here today. I know we kind of upset our agenda apple cart, but so appreciate it. Next to Vice Chair Vanderwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here. Just, I guess my question is going to pertain to, as we know, high school sports, this is my feeling, high school sports are to develop the team atmosphere, the opportunity for young individuals to excel in a program, learn what it is to be a team, and then hopefully in the future would be, you know, one of the fortunate ones to be able to go to college if it's on their own or through a scholarship. But if this bill moves forward, what do we think we're going to do to really prohibit the natural learning curve inside the high school sports and become more of an individual type situation and lose some of those benefits of what we're trying to incorporate in the high school atmosphere?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I don't believe we'll lose. So currently, your top 1% of athletes are very individualized already, and obviously they're on a team, and but they are our top stars are already sometimes being exploited by their high schools with their name, image, and likeness. Sometimes marketing goes out with their name or their image, being on certain marketing material to come to the school. And so this would put in place that they can benefit off their name, image, and likeness instead of being exploited. And again, this is probably just talking about the top 1% of student athletes here in the state.
I appreciate that. I guess we're talking the 1%. I guess then the other 99%, unfortunately, are left in the dust under the players that. But ultimately, the opportunity of being a good athlete is bringing attention to the program so that you can move on to the upper ranks. I look at some of I believe you said 20 states. I didn't see that as I looked in the articles that I read, but I did see that one of the biggest areas of concern is what it's done to start to ding the amateur sport piece in high school. And I appreciate your comments, and I look forward to learning more. But as we move forward, I think we got to look at the integrity of what we're trying to do to establish the team atmosphere and the growing up, working together. So I appreciate the bill and look forward to learning more about it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Colazar.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your testimony. I'm wondering a little bit more about, other than a parent or guardian signature, what is the level of involvement for parents and guardians in this? I just get very concerned about a bad actor trying to take advantage of a kid and their families. Mm-hmm. Are there safeguards there for the kids to make sure they aren't? Maybe you could make an argument even with NIL deals, they could totally be taken advantage of. Are there any safeguards in your bill to prevent that?
There will be in the potential legislation, and that's why we're working closely with the Michigan High School Athletic Association, because they knew this was on the horizon as it is starting to spread around the country. And so we're going to try to make sure that there is language in there to not allow for things like collectives where a particular booster could say, hey, if you all come to this school, we're going to have NIL deals for you here. Because then what you're going to have is you're going to have these mega teams, and then the fairness across high school athletics is going to be diminished. So we're going to make sure that that isn't allowed in the legislation. So I hope that answers your question, or I may have veered off there.
Yeah, no, it's just more of preventing any safeguards for
Oh, yes,
exploitation.
yeah. And that's why we're also going to make sure that it's not coaches can't be involved, athletic directors at the school. Any deals need to go through and notified for reporting purposes through Michigan High School Athletic Association with their parents and guardians for any potential deals.
Vice Chair Reingans.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Rep. Wilson, for being here. My question is, as was said earlier, these students are not going to be employees, so they're not going to be regulated under employment law. But in employment law, we do have like a minimum age of being able to be compensated for your work. Mm-hmm. And so is there a minimum age for this? Did I miss that?
No, we haven't there's no age in the potential legislation. It's high school athletes. So if you're in high school, then you would be afforded this opportunity.
Is there a way to add some sort of minimum age, perhaps, that might align with other things, just so folks know? I mean, sometimes 13-year-olds are in high school. I would feel more comfortable if it was 14 at least, but I don't know if that's possible or necessary.
The only thing, I didn't think about it in that fashion. The only thing that comes to mind right away is when you have students who excel a lot to where they're in high school earlier, and they happen to be star athletes at the same time. So you may be cutting off certain athletes from this legislation. So, but we can definitely have more thought on that particular subject.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I can just interject for a moment. I just want to.
It's your show.
Yeah, well, sure, if I may. I'm just thinking to this particular question, my experience as a coach and a school that I worked in some years ago, where Michael Jordan's son played on our basketball team. And that was certainly a situation where we had some real star power in the room, right? And yet the team functioned quite well as a team, right? So I'm weighing these things in my own experience and just thinking about, again, the question of how young is too young. And I just want to point out again something I said at the end of the collegiate discussion, and that, the world has changed. I mean, kids are monetizing themselves, whether they are athletes or not. And I appreciate when we look at this legislation, the opportunity to provide some support to them, some guardrails, because certainly kids who are out there doing it on their own are at risk of even greater exploitation than what we may have been seeing, in the current system, again, whether they're student athletes or not. And so I really just kind of want to put that back in the center, that part of what we're looking at here is how we can help protect our student athletes who might have those opportunities or be in that situation to monetize their name, and image, and likeness. And with that, Representative Paquette.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my high school hockey team in 2004 won states. It's probably because I didn't make the team. And but no one was buying their jerseys. No one was purchasing anything. They weren't selling jerseys or anything like that. So how is revenue generated around high school name, image, likeness, I guess? And are people making video games or something about high school students?
So I've actually noticed this in my own district. Actually, there was a star athlete to where he got so good and started to get national attention. Even ESPN features and things of this nature, that they started to send out marketing material for admissions. Come to this high school. Obviously we have a school of choice, and so they said, they started sending out mass mailers and they had his image on there and his name, and they didn't say come here because of him, but they were definitely, trying to use his image to entice people to come. And so they were clearly making, I guess I won't say making money, but they were clearly had an advantageous benefit by using his name and his image to gain more admissions, more people coming to the school. And that's just from my own district noticing that, but that happens around the state where certain schools have certain athletes and they try to maximize their talent while they have them.
So if more students are going to the school, then obviously that's state dollars, school aid fund dollars going to the school. So that's not necessarily revenue being generated, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So how is
not
revenue?
necessarily the school making money, but they're exploiting their name, image, and likeness, and that's really.
So how would they get compensation then from the school aid fund? Like I guess.
Are you talking about the athlete themselves?
Yeah.
No.
Or how would they get compensation? Because obviously it's not funding; it's paying.
Yeah,
for
no,
their
the
food,
athlete
shelter.
would. What this would do is allow an athlete, with their parental consent, obviously, to go into any contract with, let's say, your Honda dealership down the street, or your. It may not be Nike, but. Think of any business that may want to enter into a contract with the student for,
gotcha.
And that's why I talked about those categories where we're going to make sure that there are certain things they can't enter in contracts with, adult entertainment, casinos, gambling, things of that nature. So.
All right, and we do have another person wishing to speak to the bill, so try to take these last couple of questions and move on. Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Rep. Wilson, for speaking today. Just a few things you've said have made me wonder if there would be any case in which the school would actually have to pay the athlete for their name, because you're talking about using it to promote the school for admissions and things. would the school be kept kind of harmless from that in all situations, or are there some situations they may have to compensate the student?
I think moving forward, well, once this legislation, if it does pass and get put in place, schools will obviously get this notification that they can't use name, image, and likeness of their student athlete for these marketing materials. And so as far as being held harmless, that is a great question as far as, legally, if they use it, are they going to,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I'm
I
thinking
wouldn't
just-
say that they're going to end up having to pay the athlete, but there's obviously going to be some legalities there. So I'm glad you actually brought that up. I'm going to write that down to make sure we have language in there to address
Because it
that.
even occurs to me, there could be a poster for the Friday night game, and if it has his image and likeness, is that going to
Right.
require them to pay the athlete for that? So it's a thought.
Thank you.
Representative Hill?
Another safeguard to think about is actually, I'm glad that coaches are prohibited, because that is a place where unfortunately too many student athletes have been led down wrong paths. Clearly people, the coaches get contracts for shoes, they get contracts for other things, even at the high school level, where that coach is being compensated for the student's performance in essence. The other concern I have, and this would also apply to college athletics, is the alumni, because it's the alumni who have often really been the ones. When you look at where the scandals have been in the NCAA, it's jaw-dropping, the amount of money and the things that they will put in front of young people that is entirely unethical and unfair, and we've seen case after case of that. So I think I appreciate the safeguards, but I would just want to raise the question of alumni and how alumni and coaches and even trainers, athletics is a business. And I can tell you from in my time, from playing sports in the 80s to playing now, what kids do, travel teams and these giant facilities that we're building, it's become a very, very different thing, even from what I was doing way back 30 years ago. So it is a huge business, and I do think it's very important, and I appreciate you bringing Mr. O'Bannon into the conversation so that we have a clear sense of that history. And then, again, the alumni problem is my final question.
Thank you.
Thank you. And last question, Representative Brock.
Thank you, Chair. A follow-up, Rep. Colzar brought up, talking about protecting the children, protecting the students. If there's a minimum, would there be a maximum? Length of time contracts can be done, and bringing up, that age limit on the low end and the high end, as well as does it open the door? So our evening Monroe News, they do an article, they always put the sports on the sports page. It's local sports on our newspaper. And anytime I've been in an article or a photo, I have to sign the release for the newspaper. I guess there's still going to be that opportunity. Obviously, in high school sports, they don't make money. Most high school athletics are a net loss for the high school or for that system. The high schools are not making money off ticket sales and things of that nature. It's always a loss. But I guess my question is this still allows, or is there going to be language in there, regarding, your local newspaper is not going to pay for,
Right.
Joe Smith, who's, the star player, to be on their newspaper, but would there still be the language where this can happen? Because that's what builds the sports for these local high schools, is those news articles, those local articles, unless you're Detroit Country Day. Otherwise you're just trying to make it, as far as these high school athletics, and they're always trying to, they're always at a net loss. So I guess just that, and then the recruiters, how is the recruiting? You have Army recruiters come to your high school, you have scouts coming to the high school that are looking for, athletes, et cetera. Is there going to be some language in there that kind of limits how much, these minors can be, I don't want to say
Exploited
harassed,
or-
but exploit. Yeah,
Yeah.
to limit I don't even want to say exploitation. This is something that's good for the kids if they can make revenue. That's great. That's college money, et cetera. So will there be limits in, how often or, how much can be, they can be, presented with.
Yeah, and that's,
essentially. So I appreciate.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I think you're kind of along the lines of Rec McDonald.
Rep,
as
if
far
I
as-
can just step in, we are kind of short on
Okay,
time,
go
so I
ahead.
wonder
Yep.
if we can, if you can maybe put that on your list of recommendations
There we
you've
go.
gotten today.
Sounds good.
And we can, no, I appreciate the question. I just want to make sure we have time for everyone and we're getting close here. So, so thank you for this very engaging conversation, and thank you,
Thank you for
Representative,
having
for
me.
being here today. I think we sent you home with some notes. And then our final speaker today is Mark Ewell. I hope I said that right, representing MHSAA, who's going to share, might be able to clarify some of the things we just heard.
Good morning, thank you. I'm Mark Ewell. I'm starting my 20. When it comes to NIL, I think the most accurate description for high school students is this would really be about them being able to use their name and their image. So a well-known athlete can use their name, a well-known athlete can use their image on social media. There are very few opportunities really for their likeness. So what does this really mean at the high school level? Well, what it would mean is that it's social media posts. What it means is personal appearances, autograph sessions. It means that kids putting their name on a camp or being able to give that elite golfer or that elite tennis player being able to do lessons. And then product endorsements.
I'm sorry, if you can just go ahead and hit the mic button. Thank you.
Was using my locker room voice anyway. I'm sorry, Chair.
I mean, I didn't notice the difference, but.
Thank you for that. But with that, our current rules currently allow our student athletes to make money in parts of athletics. Our high school kids are able to go referee or officiate youth tournaments. Our kids are able to give those lessons or coach youth teams or be part of a camp or even put their name on a camp. The part for us under our current rules right now that's ambiguous is the whole social media influencer area. So we're engaged in paying attention to that. NIL started at the college level because it was a billion-dollar industry with folks making millions of dollars at the coaching and administrative level, and the concept was, well, shouldn't the student athletes here get a piece of the action? The reality is at the high school level that is not the economic model. At the high school level, you've got a school athletic budget that is typically 2 to 3% of the total school budget that impacts anywhere from 60 to 80% of kids in a school district, where I would argue that high school sports is the best value around. The bang that school districts get for their buck is there. You've got coaches that make an average of $2,400 in salary. So the economic model that the student athletes are somehow being exploited with this huge money-making operation simply is not the case at the high school level. The reason, though, we have been engaged with Representative Wilson, and depending what you read, it's either 20 states or 28 states that already have a law dealing with NIL. The reason why we have to have this on our radar is for that top 1% kids. If Michigan's a state that allows nothing, then wouldn't those top kids then move to a state with their parents for their junior and senior year, whether it be California, Florida, one of these more permissive states with NIL? So that's why we have to be engaged. 2% of all high school athletes go on to play at the Division I level. Of those kids at the Division I level, it's less than 5% that are getting access to any kind of NIL money. So should this come to the high school level, the parameters and the money that's out there, it's going to be small amounts of money, and it's going to be for literally handfuls of kids. As a potential bill moves forward, where we are all on board, is something that is for individual opportunities for individual kids. For those kids that have that social media profile, that have that recognition, there should be opportunities there for individual kids on an individual basis. Where we will voice our opposition is if there's a formation or creation of collectives. So that booster club at that, it could be a non-public or public school, a very affluent school, to where now boosters are going to collect this pot of money, and students who now come to our high school, where you're going to get just kind of an across-the-board NIL deal, that will undermine everything that we're doing at the high school level. If we're going to do something here to provide opportunities for individual kids, we have to not allow opportunities for, let me just say, creative adults to try and swoop in and find a way to make money for themselves, for the school, and those kinds of things. Please know that currently kids that do pay tuition at the high school level, it can never be based on athletics. So a student that attends a non-public school, if they are getting financial aid, it's all based on their FAFSA form and their family's economic status. It has nothing to do whatsoever at our level with any kind of ability. The other thing we get nervous about is if NIL comes to high school, it's the involvement of coaches. My wife has been a high school basketball coach for 30 years. She makes pennies on the dollar with her $2,400 stipend. And now if we're going to add another layer on coaches that they now have to be cognizant in kind of almost deal connectors for business opportunities, we're going to have a hard time keeping some of our adults that just want to give back and make a difference in the lives of kids if we lay another layer. So where the MHSAA is, we want to avoid the haves and the have-nots with the collectives and with the groups. We're going to stay engaged with Representative Wilson and any others interested on this. We would just encourage that anything that moves forward, it needs to be narrow, individual opportunities for individual students. Madam Chair, I appreciate the time.
Thank you, and I really appreciate your voice here today. I think it helped clarify a number of the questions or thoughts that we all had independently. So thank you for your time. I don't see any further questions today, except Vice Chair Reigans.
Sorry, my one question is, it sounds like you do want some sort of legislation to help clarify what's in and what's out.
I think we could handle that with our own regulations, but I also understand the realities of the political world and what's going on in other states. We were working before a bill or a concept of a bill came up on how to make these lines brighter, social media influencing, what kids can and can't do, because again, we would not want that very high-profile kid going into their junior year who's being recruited by everyone and saying, we're going to move to fill in the blank state because we can go there and make X number of dollars. That's why it was already on our radar.
Okay, thank you.
One more.
It's an interesting conversation.
Well, great. Yeah, we do need to get
Can
going,
you
so.
do can you quantify the number of high school athletics and number of schools that would be impacted?
In our membership, we have 748 high schools. Approximately 76% of those are traditional public high schools. Another approximately 8 to 9% of charter schools, and the remaining number are non-publics. We have approximately 180,000 kids every year that participate in some level of a high school sport. All of my research in this area of kids who could potentially be in the NIL mix, those very top kids, we believe it would be less than 25 a year. Again, that's a guesstimate, but just knowing what's going on nationally and the total landscape. So 180,000 participants, and we're really talking about, can't do the math in my head, but it's a very small percentage.
All right, thank you for that. And certainly, this has been a very engaging conversation, so thank you, everyone, for your questions. If you do need further information, I know Representative Wilson and I'm assuming Mr. Ewell
Yes, ma'am.
are available to provide more information to the committee and to members. So thank you so much for being here today. Thank you all for your grace in handling our shuffling of the cards here today. And wait, let me make sure I got it all. There are no absent members, so I believe we are ready to adjourn. Thank you.